The base is dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's April 29th. It's a Wednesday. It's a Wall Pass Wednesday. So for those of you out there listening, we take questions on Wednesdays specifically. We take questions almost every day, but Wednesdays, it's your show. So whatever you guys want to get into, if you want to get into the latest from Europe, which we've got some updates after our show ended last night that we'll get into. If you've got questions about soccer in the United States, men, women, top flight, lower divisions, whatever's on your mind, you want to get into historical stuff, wherever you want to go, y'all drive it this morning. Just tweet at us, at Soccer Down Here. If you listen live and you're not on Twitter, and I know there's some of you guys out there, feel free to send us a message on Facebook. Send us an email, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. However you want to get in touch to join the show today, go for it. We'll be getting into lots of different things. There's still some elements out of Europe that we didn't even get to touch on last night. Some ideas about what the game could look like in the future, what the game could look like in the coming weeks. There's lots of different elements to touch on, and John has been up scouring the wires. They're not wires anymore. It's just an internet. It's not like the old school wire services. But John's got some reports for us this morning.
That he does. And it appears that if the takeover bid for Newcastle from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia goes through, it looks like the leader in the clubhouse to be the new manager would be Mauricio Pochettino at a salary of just under £20 million a year.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be the highest paid. I think that would move him into second. It'd be more than what Jose Mourinho's making at Spurs after he took over for Pochettino. Pep Guardiola still makes the most. I said when this started, out of the names that had come up, the one I would pick, even though there is some risk in it, is Mauricio Pochettino. And I think one of the pieces that has come out about why they are enamored with Pochettino is exactly how I would feel about it. He went into Tottenham and oversaw it's not like they were in a horrible place when he got there, but he turned them into, I think, a top-flight club. Mm-hmm. They flirted with it before. He kind of put them on a different plane, and he's a building guy. He's not, a flash guy who's going to come in and want you to necessarily spend all the money on transfer fees. I mean, luckily you're going to have an owner that will have money to spend in this current climate, so he'll be able to get players. But he likes to build it up, and Newcastle needs that. Newcastle is not in a position right now where they can just walk in the door and say, yeah, we're the big shots. They're not, and they've got work to do to get there. Pochettino's a guy who likes to put in that work.
And a bit of a spin-off of that, if this particular purchase goes through from the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which is controlled by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, it appears that Saudi Arabian media may battle it out with beIN Sports for the rights for the Premier League in the Middle East if it goes through. No,
I mean, duh. They just bought a team in the league. Of course they're going to want to own the rights to televise the league.
So according to the Daily Mail, quote, a source tells the Daily Mail, this is a long-standing conflict between Qatar and Saudi and is very political. It is motivated by money and status. beIN Sports will be worried about the arrival of the Saudi state as Premier League owners. The Premier League and Champions League are huge in Saudi Arabia, and for the Premier League, it's an untapped market in terms of commercial gain.
Well, there's a lot of elements to this, and we've talked about the human rights side of it and how it is very hard to draw a line under one and not draw a line under others in terms of owners in the league. That's going to be a difficult decision for the league to deal with. But take the countries out of it and the Saudi Arabia-Qatar conflict out of it. If Saudi Arabia, a member of their government, buys a team, don't you think that the state-run television is going to want to buy the rights that include said team?
Mm-hmm.
It's a giant duh that has nothing to do with anything else other than they just bought this thing and they want to show it off. Which games do you think are going to get shown in Saudi Arabia the most? Newcastle. They own the team. That's the point. The rest of it is distraction. Like, they're going to try to buy the rights. They're probably going to outbid whatever it is. And, yeah, if you're being sport, again, beyond the country conflicts, if you're being sport, you're like, oh, crap. We're going to lose the rights to this. And then you do have the piracy issue that I don't know where that's going to fall. I don't know if that's going to be an issue in this ownership purchase, if they're going to be able to clarify things with that. I don't know. There's been lots of claims, and if that is what holds it up, then that's a different conversation. But also, if they come in and buy the rights and pay the other owners in the league a lot of money, well, that's going to have something to do with the other owners approving this purchase.
And also on the board, and this is strictly Lane 8 material right now, is that if the £300 million bid does not go through, there's apparently interest from an American ownership group who would be in the neighborhood of wanting to pay $350 million to Mike Ashley for Newcastle as well. So we have a queue building up.
Okay, well, where has the queue been before is question one. And if they're coming in $350 million, I'm assuming, versus £300 million.
I think the number that I saw was £350 million.
Well, why is Mike Ashley taking less money from a different ownership group?
Don't know.
Well, that's my question for you, is why would that even be a thing? Because that makes no sense. Mike Ashley's not about throwing money away. So that I'm a wee bit skeptical that somebody else would come in with a bigger bid and it wouldn't be pursued. It's just like, well, if this doesn't happen, then that sounds a little fishy to me. Just saying.
Just saying.
But no, I mean, the more important thing here is if there's somebody willing to spend $350 million on Newcastle, an American, whoever it is. Do we have any names? Is it just unnamed person?
The guy that started Clear TV, Henry Morris.
Okay, so if Henry Morris doesn't get Newcastle, he's going to have his choosing of other clubs. And not all of them are going to have the things that Newcastle has. I've always felt that Newcastle is the club that could easily be pushed into a top club because they have the infrastructure to do it. But what if our friend here decided to go buy Leeds? Spend a lot less and potentially get them into the Premier League next year, depending on what they end up doing with everything. I don't think they're going to hold up their promotion. And I think Leeds is another one of those clubs that has a lot of infrastructure that is there that can allow you to be a top half Premier League club very quickly. So that's the more important thing here is, okay, there's somebody who reportedly is going to offer more money and Mike Ashley just doesn't want more money. I'm, again, skeptical. But if there is interest in buying a club, well, I would imagine that you're going to have clubs that are available for sale like now because you've got clubs in financial trouble. So keep an eye on that because that's a name you might need to keep an eye on and understand that he's got the money to spend.
And this is from the Daily Mirror. Morris is a big fan of Liverpool's Boston owners John Henry and Tom Warner. He was hugely impressed by the way Henry and Warner made Liverpool a force again long after periods of underachievement, and he would pursue their model of success and building the team to get them to that Liverpudlian level. Wants to use a similar
boatload of money,
similar model and business plan to reawaken slumbering giants Newcastle and make them Premier League title contenders. That is,
I mean, come on, Liverpool and Newcastle are not the same club. First off, so just to say, like, yeah, I'm going to follow Liverpool's model. Well, Liverpool's model includes a heritage that very few clubs have. You can't recreate that out of thin air, or whatever else you're going to try to use. It doesn't work that way. Liverpool can get there faster and do things in a certain way that nobody else can because they're Liverpool. Newcastle doesn't have that trick up its sleeve. I mean, outside of that, what is it that Liverpool has done in going from where they were to where they are now? They have retained players, and that's one thing that would give them, I think, a little bit of a difference than some other clubs. They have purchased really, really well. They haven't always necessarily just bought the best, most expensive player available, although they have done that too, and hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
I don't know why they've tried to paint it like something's wrong with that. They've done it too, Virgil van Dijk. But they have also, maybe more than most, bought players on the way up, taken them to another level, and then spent the significant amount of money to keep them, and not just looked at it as move on, get another player, rinse, repeat. They've also went out and got a transformational kind of manager in Jurgen Klopp. If this goes through on the other ownership side that is actually in negotiations here, Pochettino is that kind of manager, potentially. I think he is. We'll have to see, because he's got to show more than he did at Tottenham. I think at first he's got to show that he's a title contender. That's going to be the number one thing. He's got to lift a trophy. But I think he has that type of personality, that type of mentality to be that kind of manager and do the things that are talked about here. But this ownership group, because it doesn't seem like they're going to get Newcastle if they're on the sideline and they're talking about money, but there's actually voting going on the other ownership takeover. There are other clubs that you can do elements of that with. And I really think Leeds is the one. That feels like the best purchase that is out there for somebody that wants to invest that kind of money.
Yeah, Radrizzani, the current owner, said that in their current structure in the championship, if I remember correctly, they're losing £8 to £10 million a year, and he said that that's not a business model that you want to have continue over a long term.
No, well, duh. It's losing $8 to $10 million a year. I don't have $8 to $10 million a year just to lose over a long period of time. At some point, you want to make money. But the point is that Leeds is trying to get into the Premier League because there's bigger money there. Losing $8 to $10 million a year is a responsible way to gamble on that. Sounds crazy saying $8 to $10 million you're losing, it's responsible. But compared to some of these other jokers, it's pretty freaking responsible. So, yeah, I mean, they're at least managing it, and they're pretty much there at this point. So they get in, then it's worth that investment. Do they sell then? I don't know. Or do they accept, a partner? Maybe that's more of what they're looking for. Maybe they feel like they've invested enough to get there, and they want to do it themselves. That's also possible. But, $350 million is a lot of money. Would you take that same offer over to Leeds? No, you'd probably start a little bit lower. But I don't know. I mean, the more important thing here is you've got Premier League clubs, according to Miguel Delaney of The Independent, 4 that are on the brink of administration. I don't know what it is like in the championship. You've probably got a larger number that are not in good financial shape, but might be able to stave off administration. If you've got somebody walking into the party, waving around the Benjamins, they're going to find somebody to take those Benjamins. Now, the question is going to be who and how much and what is their potential? Because not every Premier League club is the same. I don't think, and I don't think they're for sale, but I'm just pulling out a name. I don't think Everton has the same potential as Newcastle.
Right.
I think Newcastle, to me, has the greatest potential to return your investment. There's clubs that are even smaller that, is it worth $350 million? No. Is it worth less? Yeah. Could you still get a return on a smaller investment? Yep. And this is the reality of the current situation. You're going to have people who are going to be able to survive it financially and come out of it just fine. And they're going to have their pick of distressed properties, including soccer clubs, to buy. And how long is it going to be distressed? We don't know. We don't know when the big money's going to come back. But with the top flights being so driven by TV's taking a hit right now, but TV's also desperate for this programming, and they've seen the returns in the past on it. I think the TV money is going to come back pretty quick. So I think it's not quite as risky, and you can get deals right now on buying teams, big teams potentially. And we'll see where it goes. But you got somebody walking into the party with a lot of money, they're going to find somebody to talk to.
The source continued to talk to the Daily Mirror, and where, in describing Morris and his level of investment and what he sees in Liverpool as a property in Newcastle, the investor has seen the way Liverpool's owners have harnessed themselves with the local community and made it a team effort with everyone pulling in the same direction. Newcastle have a huge and loyal support. It's a club with massive potential.
Yeah, it's the club that can be the biggest, the fastest. Just is. They have the infrastructure. They have the pieces around. And when I say infrastructure, I'm not just talking about buildings. I'm talking about what the club is. And they do have that huge support base. If Newcastle puts a product on the field that is worth people's time and energy, like, they've got the people who are willing to give it. So, yeah, they're the one that make the most sense. But it sounds like this guy's late to the party.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's offering that much money and it's more than what the other folks are, why isn't Mike Ashley talking to him? That's a very important question that doesn't make any sense.
Here's a possible answer to that. One of the guys who is attached to Mr. Morris is a gentleman by the name of Chris Ronnie, a disgraced former business associate of Ashley, and this is the Mirror's words, and that will trouble some fans. The Cheshire businessman, Ronnie, ran JJB Sports from June 2007 to March 2009 after the company was sold by then Wigan chairman Dave Whalen. Ronnie, who was jailed for fraud in 2014, is understood to have facilitated the introduction of Ashley to Morris.
Okay.
Since leaving prison, he has returned to the business world, but there are no plans to involve him at Newcastle, as he's banned from being a company director. From the Mirror, long-suffering Toon fans are hoping the Staveley bid goes through, despite the Premier League being nervous of publicity over Saudi Arabia's human rights record.
Yeah, so that's where we are right now. I mean, it's basically you got the human rights record attached to Saudi Arabia versus a guy who's out of prison who was in there for fraud involving the game. So, yeah, take your pick, flip a coin, have fun. That's where we're at.
Yes. So, you want to stick with the Premier League here?
You're in charge. Go for it.
All right. Alex Shaw from ESPN FC from about 40 minutes ago. The coronavirus, this is the headline. Premier League on collision course with players over restart plans, from sources. Alex Shaw's lead. A growing number of Premier League players do not want to play football during the coronavirus crisis in what is a major blow to the league's hopes of resuming the 2019-20 season, sources have told ESPN. In a significant setback to the league's Project Restart scheme to get elite football underway after play was suspended March 13, players across numerous Premier League teams have severe reservations about playing during the coronavirus pandemic. One source at a Premier League club told ESPN, quote, "A lot of players are very uncomfortable with coming back. The only way the league takes this seriously is when someone at a club dies. We will look back on this time with sadness in the future," end quote.
Look, This is the balancing act, isn't it? I mean, this is the reality I think everybody's facing. And there's no easy answers here because, I mean, let's be real about this. You know, I've seen these types of stories get stirred up. I would assume there are players who want to play too. You know, I don't think it is 100% just don't want to play. You know, you're getting, you know, somebody going to talk to this reporter, then things get blown up in the media, then big headlines get written, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But here's the reality that we just have to face when it comes to this, and you can put a lot of other industries into it. If you don't have games, if you're the Premier League, Delaney's already said you've got 4 clubs that are on the brink of administration. That's 4 of 16 that are there right now. I would assume that some of those would be ones that would be going down if the season played out. Anyway, you've got clubs on the brink of administration at the top flight. I would assume there are more clubs on the brink of administration, second division, even more in the third, even more in the fourth, even more in the non-conference side of it. That's real. That's a fact. When that happens, there's no money to pay people. And that's the balancing act here. You know, players who have taken care of their money are going to be in a different conversation than players who haven't, or players who have only just started to make much money or whatever. You know, players in the championship are going to have a different conversation than somebody who's on millions and millions of dollars a month in the Premier League. They might have been able to weather this very comfortably. Others haven't. But the longer it goes, and I totally understand this, it has to be safe. That's the number one thing with all of it. However you're going to come back, it has to be safe. But this mentality, what will happen the longer this goes, and I just do not see any other way around it, is the next step, if you're able to find a way to come back and you don't. Let's say you've got it figured out, you can play behind closed doors, you have a vetted plan that has been approved that you're moving forward with, and you don't come back. The next step is you're going to have clubs that can't pay their staff and their players. They're going to have clubs that cannot meet their contractual obligations. What does that mean? They go to administration because they cannot function anymore. That's literally just the next step. And if that doesn't matter, then that doesn't matter. You know, I think it does matter. I think there are things that you can try to work towards. Number one element always is it has to be safe. There doesn't have to be this idea that it is 100% or 0% in terms of it's 100% exactly like it was before. No, it's not going to be that. We know that. You're going to have to figure out some things to ensure safety. Absolutely. And you might not be able to, and you might not be able to play, and then these things happen just naturally because they can't. But the idea that, you know, it's just, well, people don't want to play because of whatever, because of fear, because of, you know, they don't think it looks good. The next step is going out of business. The next step is not being able to get that paycheck. That's just it. I mean, that's the reality. And I know we've seen things already said in this country. I've seen plenty of people say, like, no, sports isn't important, don't play. Well, tell that to people who sports puts money in their bank account and puts food on their table, and tell them that their job's not important. See how they feel about it. That sucks. That's the hard reality of the world we're in right now. But, you know, it's you have to keep in mind where people are coming from with this. Premier League players saying that they don't want to come back. One, we don't know how many. We don't know what the numbers are here. But two, they're probably some of the people who can afford not to come back right now. But in the long run, as we've said, there are not going to be as many jobs out there for these players when we're done with this. Period. You're going to have lower division players go back to the days of the 50s and the 60s where they're working a second job. That's real. I mean, MLS players were working a second job not that long ago. Some of the ones on rookie deals. You're going to see those things happen again because that's going to be the reality in the short term coming out of it. So, every time this stuff comes up, it feels like the goal of it is to just say, shut everything down, don't even think about playing for a year, for 2 years, till whatever. And you can't tell people who have either, got their life savings tied up in their club, people who have, put their life's work into the club that they work at, players who have, grinded and are only now finally starting to make, real money. You can't just tell people like that, yeah, well, sorry, that sucks. Go be a bricklayer. Because, that's what people are facing. So I think a little bit of the idea that just, no, don't even try to think about a way to come back, I think it's very insensitive. And I think it's something that we have to understand is not being done recklessly. It's not being done with bad intentions. It's not being done because, human lives are not important. I think anybody who pulls that line out is really trying to just start a fight. None of this happens if it's not safe. And everybody could do all the right things and not come up with a safe way to do it, and these scary elements of teams going away and jobs being lost and all of that could happen anyway. But this idea that you can't even try to figure out a way to come back to action is, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's very insensitive, and we'll see. We'll see. I'd love to know more than a random report from unnamed random players that all the players don't want to come back. I would assume that's not true. I would assume there are a lot of players who need a paycheck. And that's why you've had a lot of players push back on taking a pay cut or taking a pay deferral. Because they want that money or they need that money. Well, that money can't keep coming if, soccer clubs don't play soccer. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Shaw's article continues. He says, sources have told ESPN there's a reticence among players, especially while the social distancing measures remain unchanged, to play again. That's part of the reason why not every player has used the training facilities at clubs who started to resume work. A source at another Premier League club has told ESPN players with young families and pregnant wives are concerned about playing football during the pandemic. And many believe with the best will in the world, you can't play football and social distance. Sources have told ESPN some are wondering how it's possible. They're being told to get ready to come back when the situation is like it is.
Again, I think we're really just mixing up all kinds of things, and it's really annoying that we do this. Of course, you can't play soccer with social distancing because the idea would be that you are guaranteeing that the players who come back are not positive. You are doing the testing to make sure that you can eliminate the social distancing in their soccer world. Now, as always comes up with this, are you going to put them in some kind of isolation to ensure that negative test doesn't become a positive because they interact with somebody? That is one idea that has been on the table. There's also the idea of consistent testing. There are issues with every idea right now. Is there going to be enough tests? Are you going to get the results quick enough? The thing about the results coming quick enough, and this came up in an interview with Dr. Fauci today as well, am I misremembering it, John, that when the NBA, when that issue happened 6 weeks ago, they tested both teams in Oklahoma City and had results that night?
I thought that was the case, yeah.
That was 6 weeks ago. If we have not figured out, one, I know making enough tests is an issue, but we have tests that you can get the results back quickly. If players have to do a test the morning of a match, whatever. I don't know. I'm not coming up with the plans. You're coming up with plans to ensure safety. But this idea that you can't play soccer with social distancing, the whole idea is to make sure that the players are not carrying the virus, and you are doing the testing to determine that. And then the social distancing, if everybody is not a carrier, is a different conversation, right?
Yep.
As I've said, you're not social distancing in your house, are you?
No.
No. Because your house, and you're not doing the testing, but your house, because of what you are doing, is presumed safe. In this case, you would be doing the testing. Your house would be pretty freaking big, which would make it more difficult to ensure 100%. That's why the testing is important. But that's the only thing that's going to allow you to come back and play. So when we keep putting these things in articles, this is, I guess it's just one of my pet peeves with these kinds of things. You are not giving all of the proper information. Like, no, if you are not allowed to be around somebody because you don't know if they are positive with carrying the virus, then no, you're not going to play soccer with them. Duh. But if you are in a controlled situation where you know that they are not positive, and the testing is being done to ensure that that doesn't change, and if it does change, then that player is taken out of action. That's how you do this. And you have to create the plan to ensure that. That is part of the whole process. You can't play soccer with social distancing. That is taking something and putting it into the article or putting it into the conversation that is not valid. And it is misleading. And it's very frustrating when you see that stuff, because nobody is saying that would be part of the conversation. Am I wrong in that?
Trying to keep... No.
I'm just. I want to make sure, because
no,
I'm
but,
not
and
a
that's
doctor. I'm learning about this as much as everybody else is, but that was my understanding for the testing part of it.
Yeah. No, I mean the NBA jumped on it the as quickly as they could. I was about to say the second that they had information.
They had already bought the tests. They were ahead of it a little bit in terms of this could be an issue. They had purchased the test privately, and I know that got some people really rankled up that they had tests and other people didn't. They bought them, and they tested everybody that was in the building that night. Because if I remember right, the Jazz, they bussed back to Utah, to Salt Lake City. They didn't fly back, and there was some kind of isolation for the two players that tested positive.
Yeah, Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, and that was handled, again, like 6 weeks ago. I'd hope there's been some progress in all of these departments since.
Yeah. We do have some folks who have submitted stuff for Wall Pass Wednesday. If you've got stuff that you want to submit for Wall Pass Wednesday, let us know on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. And it is Atlanta United material. It is Coventry City material from John Nason. And Nathan Pugh is in with his Liverpudlian points of view, and also quoting a recent catchphrase when it comes to Pochettino and Newcastle. So we'll be getting to that a little later on in the show. But we mentioned the Premier League and how they are trying to keep fan engagement, because there is a concern about fans when they would come back engaged in the league. And from the Daily Mail and Jack Gaughan, drive-in screenings, digital viewing parties, and cardboard cutouts of fans are ideas under consideration by Premier League clubs when football returns behind closed doors. The teams are discussing ways in which they can, quote, maintain fan loyalty during the pandemic, with some acutely aware that supporters could lose appetite for the sport when subjected to, quote, soulless, end quote, fixtures on television. Obviously, and the article continues, fading public interest would have serious financial implications for commercial revenues, and there's a belief that fan bases must be kept engaged over the coming months.
Well, definitely that. And, luckily Sam Allardyce is not running a team right now, because you want soulless. It's soulless with fans in the building. If you take the fans out of it, geez, it's going to be horrible soccer. There are some managers who it's going to be a concern. I mean, the managers who played negative soccer had just awful tactics, anti-football. Well, it's going to be really glaring without fans in the stands. So we'll see if there's any pressure on that. Club owners may be putting pressure on that. There could be. What were the various ideas? I want to touch on each one of them.
Cardboard cutouts of fans.
There's been a club in Germany that's talked about that. It was basically a way to fundraise.
Borussia Mönchengladbach.
Yeah, fans would buy, a cardboard cutout and it'd be put in the stands for their games. That's kind of cool. I mean, if it's an optional thing and fans want to do it, and it's not like the club just doing it and putting a bunch of random cardboard cutouts of random people that they got off of stock images, then yeah, I'm okay with that.
And according to Borussia Mönchengladbach, those cutouts were either cost £17 each, or they were valued at £17 each and placed in those.
I don't think they're valued at much of anything. I mean, it's a cardboard cutout of a random person.
Meaning that. Well, what I'm saying is that the cost was 17, but I don't know how much money was spent in making the cardboard cutout, and then you'll talk about profit margins and things like that.
You're paying a whole lot more than £17 for your cardboard cutout to be there, because it's kind of like a ticket that you're buying. I think the idea was that I don't remember the numbers, but you're paying more than 17 because otherwise, why do it?
Yeah. Drive-in screenings.
That makes a ton of sense. We were talking about this last night. It feels like if anybody could have been doing really well with this, and I don't know why they were not allowed to be open, it would have been a drive-in theater, right?
Yeah.
There are still a few. The one that's actually pretty close to us was not allowed to be open until recently, which is kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I wish I had thought of it, because that would have been something to do to get out of the house. Is we're sitting in our car, everything is good. You don't have the concessions open, that's fine. You just literally drive in, sit, and watch the movie. That would make a lot of sense. So can you set those kinds of things up for matches? Yeah, I would think that you can in a lot of city centers. I mean, I remember, this was 96 when REM's concert film, Road Movie, came out. They did screenings on the sides of buildings in different cities, and they did one in Buckhead. And we were like on a rooftop watching it. Could you find a place where you can set up one of the giant screens that would work to do a drive-in viewing of a match? Yeah, I think you could. That would actually be kind of cool.
Yeah. And then the third option was a digital viewing party.
Yeah, and those are easy to do. I mean, a lot of that's just engagement with hashtags. You're going to have to get, watch-along kind of ideas with club legends, front office people, whatever, watching along with the fans and talking to the fans about it. There's ways to do that. That's an easy one. Some clubs already do stuff that's kind of along those lines anyway. The others are going to take a little more creativity, but that's what all of this is going to take, to be honest. If you want to keep fans engaged, if you want to keep money coming into the bank accounts, these clubs are going to have to get very creative.
The Bundesliga their plans to restart could be pushed back a week, despite getting the green light from Germany's Ministry of Labor ahead of Angela Merkel's decision, with players facing a quasi-quarantine to see their families. From Will Griffey at the Mail, could be pushed back to May 16th as they wait for Merkel's verdict on the plan where players would be quasi-quarantined. The current proposal is to play in Germany for that to resume May 9, but a spike in coronavirus cases, quoting the article, has put that under threat. Country's Ministry of Labor has given a green light to that strategy, but Merkel's meeting on Thursday will see the topic discussed, and that is the final hurdle in determining when things could start.
We'll know more tomorrow. It's going to be Merkel to make the final decision on it. So we'll know more tomorrow with that. You've got, lots of different agencies within the government that have approved the plan. The timing, sure, it could get pushed back. I said I didn't expect it to be that second weekend in May. I thought it would be later in the month, but you've got a lot of people signing off on it, but ultimately it is going to be Merkel who makes that decision, and we'll see what's said tomorrow.
Bild is reporting that the date would be May 16th. The DFL has outlined how they will quasi-quarantine players to keep both them and the public at as low a risk as possible. A letter from the governing body to the Ministry of Labor read, quote, "In this respect, the players live in a zone that is next to their private home, on the other side, training ground, the stadium's player area, the team hotels, and the team bus." The Rhenish Post reports that quasi-quarantine proposal has done enough to garner support at the sports ministerial conference. But once again, as you say, it's going to come down to what Angela Merkel says on Thursday, so we'll know more about that then.
Yeah, you've got to figure out logistics. I mean, I've seen some of the pushback in that, players wouldn't want to be in any kind of a quarantine. They'd want to be able to do whatever they want to do. Well, again, as it comes down to it, they might not be able to get paid if they don't find a way to be able to play safely. If the quarantine element is part of playing safely, then that's what it's going to come down to. And that's just, it's not a desire or anything on my part. It's just, these are the facts that are in front of us. If you don't get games going in Germany, you've got anywhere between 11 to 14 clubs in the top two divisions that are looking at insolvency. That's what's coming up in the next month. That's been reported widely. So if that means you've got to figure out some kind of a quarantining setup to do it, and if you want to play, then yes, you have to sign off on not going to do anything other than train, be at home with your family. Your family's going to have to sign off on this too, because if you're going to be home with them, they can't be going out and bringing virus into the home. Like, all the things that we're doing anyway, right?
Yep.
Like, you've got to have those signed off on if you want to play games, if you want to get paid, if you want to avoid clubs going into insolvency, because that's a month away. Like, it's not way down the road and we can wait and see what happens. Like, this siren has been going off in Germany for a month. And they were able to push it back, but you're still looking at a number of clubs potentially not having money to pay their bills next month. That's why they're trying to play games.
The Chinese Super League says that they will either return as normal or not at all, according to the Chinese FA. The country's football governing body has outlined plans to get their campaign of the Chinese Super League underway in May, but have stated that they will not compromise on the quality of their product. They have revealed a 3 no's policy, N-O-S, no's.
Oh, I'm sure this really goes well. Yeah, let's say what we're not going to do, because that's always a way to create a plan for success.
Whereby they will not host games in empty stadia.
Okay.
Not extend into 2021, nor reduce the number of games in a season.
Okay, couple of things. China's in a very different situation than everybody else in terms of timelines, so I think it's far more realistic for them to say, we'll wait an extra month or two to have fans in the stands. That makes a little sense. The whole thing about not playing fewer games and not extending into 21, that's kind of idiotic, if you ask me, because that gets you back to the question, would you rather have nothing, or would you rather have 25 games? If you can have, and again, China's closer to having spectators than anybody else in this conversation, if you can have 20 games, 25 games, whatever, with fans in the stands, but you don't finish the full schedule as was constructed, You're going to throw that away? Like, again, that doesn't make any sense, does it? So I'm very skeptical of their 3 no's plan, which sounds a little idiotic to me.
South China Morning Post says the final decision will be taken on whether to continue next week. In any event, while the season may be canceled, the country's FA competition will still go ahead.
Oh, people in soccer are really good at doing stupid things. So, yeah, we're not going to play league play, but sure, we'll have the FA Cup because, that's what we do. Because that'll be able to fly. Get on the same page and stop being grandstanding and having 3 no's plans, morons.
And a canceled season, according to the Daily Mail, would throw up major problems for clubs in keeping their players and coaches, like Rafa Benitez. The manager of Dalian Yifang had been linked with moves back to Europe, and a lack of action in China may accelerate that.
Yeah. Wow, that's a shock. they might not be able to keep players and managers there if there's nothing to do. Crazy that might happen. It's probably why they're going to play some games when they're able to, even if it's not the full schedule. Don't say stupid things that are going to make you look stupid.
Tom Calamas, as we move from China back to Italy, Tom Calamas for the Daily Mail says, Italians football's chances of resuming the season are becoming increasingly slim, according to the country's sports minister.
Wasn't it like yesterday that it was becoming increasingly positive?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking because my brain's melted.
Serie A clubs, according to Calamas, are at loggerheads with Italy's politicians over the refusal to reopen training grounds when the lockdown is partially eased on May 4, meaning stars will be forced, and this is directly from the article, this is not me editorializing here, meaning stars will be forced to use local parks for outdoor fitness work. Even though Italian FA chief executive Gabriele Gravina is determined to resume the season next month, the government appear more and more skeptical at the chances of doing so, especially with the 2019-20 campaign already curtailed in Belgium, Holland, and France. Quoting Vincenzo Spadafora, the sports minister, I honestly see the path for resumption being narrower and narrower. The decision in France may push Italy and other European countries to follow that line.
The decision in France is different than the decision in Italy and Germany and England and Spain because the TV money is far less. It's a fact. You can not like that. You can say that that's not what should be driving the decision, but it's real. France can move on, and also the French government made that decision. Now, if the Italian government makes the decision, then it's a different conversation, but right now they have not done that. Spain and Italy have been kind of linked in a lot of this. Spain in Sky Sports today reported that professional sports people in Spain have been given the go-ahead to return to training starting May 4th. The allowance of individual training sessions is part of Phase 0, the preparatory phase. This was announced on Tuesday by the country's president, Pedro Sanchez. Training sessions at club centers will be allowed in Phase 1, which gets underway on May 11th. There will be added measures in place to avoid a second peak of the virus. La Liga's already sent clubs a detailed set of protocols. This is what they'll follow once training is allowed. That preparation phase will be followed by individual practices, then smaller group sessions, then full squad sessions. There's a progression here. The first step is is being allowed to be training in the facilities. This preparatory phase, if you want to get action going, and England has talked about it, we're reading about players in the U.S. doing this. They are in contact with their clubs. They are working out on their own to keep their individual fitness up. If Italy is got a week or two delay where players have to do that on their own before they can go back to team facilities, they're going to do that to be that much further ahead when they can get into the training facilities. But the decision on being into the training facilities, that's going to come down to governmental agencies. France, two things. The government said, no, we're not doing anything until September 1st. And the league didn't have as much of a reason to push and put pressure on that because the TV money is not as big. The TV money is going to drive teams playing behind closed doors. And talked about it yesterday with MLS. MLS is in a very unique situation because it's not just Major League Soccer in this country. If Major League Baseball finds a way to play, if the NBA finds a way to finish their season, if the NHL finds a way to finish their season, if college football finds a way to function, MLS will, in a lot of ways, have to, even if it is not a moneymaker, because of perception. Because if they decide to cancel the season while others play, you're going to look lesser than. It's going to look bad. And also, as we've said, MLS's structure has helped them weather this a lot better than, potentially up to 14 clubs in Germany looking at insolvency, 4 clubs in the Premier League potentially looking at administration. Haven't heard numbers on France and Italy and Spain, but you've got to assume they're out there. You haven't heard anything like that in MLS because MLS is structured differently. Everybody is part of the same business. That gives MLS a big advantage on the other side of this, but not if they don't play. So TV will drive it in Italy, in Spain, in Germany, in England, because it is such a huge amount of money, and it's going to be such an important amount of money to keep these teams going. And we're talking first division. We're not talking championship. We're not talking lower divisions. If lower divisions in those countries called their seasons where they are, I would not be shocked. MLS is not going to make its day on the TV money, but because of perception, because of potential coming through the other side of it, and because of you're about to go into negotiations with TV partners on a new deal, you would like to be a good partner for your TV partners right now and give them a product, if you can. Again, all of this is assuming you find a way that it's safe to do this. MLS is going to be the one that I think TV money's not going to drive the conversation, but they're still going to find a way to come back if they can, because of the potential benefits of doing so. And we'll see. France is not that. I mean, France, it's a small amount of money. Like, I can't remember who it was who published it on Twitter. It was estimated losses if teams did not play, if the seasons were called. And France had by far the lowest of the top 5 European leagues. I mean, it wasn't even in the same ballpark.
Mm-mm.
So the government made the decision, but you didn't get any kind of pushback from the football side. In Italy, in Germany, in Spain, in England, you will get pushback. Because if that decision is made, clubs are going to go under. I don't know if clubs in France are going to go under. They might. Haven't heard really anything specifically about it. But in other countries, we've already heard that they are. Maybe they're bluffing, maybe not. But we're talking about far more significant losses if they're not allowed to play games behind closed doors.
It was the Italian financial paper Calcio e Finanza reporting in March. The Premier League, it was 860. This is how much that these leagues would lose from a canceled season. The Premier League would lose 860 million euro. La Liga anywhere from 500 to 600 million. Serie A 350 to 450. The Bundesliga 300 to 400, and Ligue 1 100 to 200 million euro.
Yep. I mean, money is going to be part of these decisions. And I think we have to stop acting like that's either not the case or this awful, horrible thing. Sports is a business. It just is. And it's more than that, because there is far more of an emotional transaction involved in this. I think all of us who are involved in the game know that. I love a good meal at a restaurant, but I don't get the same feeling having a good meal at a restaurant as I do when my team wins a game or wins a championship. It is something that's special, but it's a business. And because it's a business, you're going to have these conversations come up. I don't know what's next in Italy. Italy has been, as hard hit by this as anybody outside of the United States and Spain and probably China. Are they going to be able to get back on the field in any reasonable time? We don't know. They have things that have factored into their decision that will not be the case in England, will not be the case in Germany. So I wish it was a little clearer, and I wish maybe we wouldn't jump to so many conclusions of, okay, we have a plan for Italy to get back on the field. They're going to start training this day. They're going to do this. They're going to get to full training sessions this day. And then the next day, no, they're not going to play at all. I don't think they're going to play ever again. I mean, can we stop driving ourselves crazy with this and maybe just report things as they're happening instead of editorializing what it means? Because I don't think any of us know what any of this means at this point.
Couple of other things before we end hour number one. There are two players that I wanted to get into to discussions with possible movement, but I also wanted to ask last night, since I was not around for the entire show, have you mentioned what has gone on in the Argentina leagues?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Diego Maradona, this is from the Daily Mail. Diego Maradona is asking for a new hand of God to end the coronavirus pandemic 34 years after he thanked divine intervention for his handball goal against England at the World Cup.
Hey, it worked for him once. Might as well try it again.
Sam McAvoy says that after the Argentine Football Association voted to suspend relegation for 2 seasons, it has saved Maradona's Gimnasia from the drop. So they caught up with Maradona, and he is asking for a higher power to bring an end to the COVID-19 pandemic. Quote, "This happened to us today, and many people are calling it a new hand of God," meaning being saved from relegation. "But today I'm asking for that hand to do away with the pandemic so people can get back to living their lives with health and happiness." Maradona said he disagreed with the decision to suspend relegation for 2 years, but called the favorable ruling a prize. On last Saturday, President Alberto Fernandez extended the mandatory nationwide quarantine period until May the 10th. And Maradona took over Gimnasia back in September 2019. So Maradona is asking for a different hand of God this time.
So just so people know what's going on here, you've got the Dutch league that went the null and void route. They said the season happened, it's going to determine European placement. We haven't figured that out yet. But there will be no promotion, there will be no relegation. You don't have champions. Done. Argentina went differently. Now, Argentina was in a different phase, too, because their league season had finished. They had a Copa de la Superliga, which was like a mini-league that had played one round. There were 10 games left in it, and those counted for relegation. So Gimnasia was in a battle. Like, they were not definitely relegated. They were not safe. They were in a relegation spot, but there was still a lot of time for it to change. They did relegation over a 3-year period, so they call it the promedios. It's a 3-year average. Now, what Argentina has decided to do is the most bold that we have seen from any league that has made this happen yet. I mean, we've seen, like, France has said their season's over, but they haven't said what any of that means yet. They have to figure that out. That's a really bad way to go forward with this. In Argentina, what they did is, one, they're going to change their calendar, which they've went back and forth between doing a calendar year season and a European season, August to May. They've done both. They went back and forth. They're going back to the calendar year, which is what CONMEBOL uses for Copa Libertadores, for Copa Sudamericana. So the next season in Argentina will start in January of 21. There's potential to have some competitions in the second half of this year, whether it's a reconfigured Copa de la Superliga that won't affect relegation, but will determine one of the Copa Libertadores spots for 21. Also, the Copa Argentina, which is like the Open Cup or the FA Cup, where everybody's in it. Now, the winner of that goes to the Libertadores. So they want to have those later this year. They'll figure that out when they get there. They're not worried about a league calendar because they've already pushed the start of the next league back to January. Okay, you got flexibility there. The relegation, instead of wiping this season out and keeping the other past seasons, they're basically starting with a clean slate. Teams, they're going to have promotion. They haven't determined how that's going to go yet. They want to do it on the field. But again, they've got time because the next season isn't going to start until January. They will have promotion. They won't have relegation this year. They won't have relegation after 21. They will have relegation for the first time again at the end of 22. So the top flight will go back to 26 teams for next year, and I would assume that it would go to 28 teams the following year before they start to work back down. Argentina had, and this is one reason why they don't really blink at these kinds of things, because their league structure has been different every couple of years. So this is nothing new, but they're going to go back to 28. They'll work back down, I guess, eventually. They were at 30 teams at one point after River Plate was relegated, and they didn't want that to happen again to any of the big clubs because of the financial implications for the whole league, not just River. So they went to 30. Then they realized that that was kind of weird, so they started working back down in their format, and now they're going to work back up to then work back down later and change the calendar while they're doing it. So if Maradona has a line, since he's gotten away with at least one hand of God, and people in the 1990 World Cup would say that he got away with a second, this time defensively. Does he have a third up his sleeve? If he can get rid of coronavirus with this line he has, then go for it, man. Go for it, Diego.
He's got a direct line to somebody, so hopefully he can hit it. And you can get that T-shirt at the teespring.com/soccerdownhere store.
Yep. Contactless shipping and ordering. I'm not touching it anyway.
No. A couple of player moves before we get into hour number 2 and what folks have sent us on a Wall Pass Wednesday. And if you've got any question, any kind of Wall-Passian thoughts on a Wall Pass Wednesday, go ahead and give us a buzz. Drop us a line here at Soccer Down Here at Longshoe. Let us know on our Facebook page. Like friend, be a part of the conversation there. We're also on the IG, on the Insta at Soccer Down Here. So hit us up with your Wall-Passian thoughts, however you wish to do so. One team that we've been talking about in MLS, and it has indirectly, these next 2 points involve this particular team. Who was the guy last week that you thought would be the pickup or a very fantastic, tremendous, unbelievable pickup for Inter Miami? Who have we been hitting?
Rodriguez.
That dude. Everton has offered James a 4-year deal as Carlo Ancelotti is desperate to be reunited with his former Real and Bayern man, and he's available for £34 million.
Yeah, I mean, he had him twice, so that makes a lot of sense.
About 40 million euros to sell him in the next transfer window. That has alerted a number of Premier League sides, according to Mundo Deportivo. Arsenal, Chelsea, and Wolves are also looking at James, but Everton are thought to be the most keen on James, with Carlo Ancelotti being desperate to be reunited with him, and desperate is their word, not mine. Tried to sign him at the start of the current campaign when he was Napoli manager, and now Ancelotti is now willing to commit to a longer-term deal for James, sign him on a permanent basis, according to that report. And James is also thought to be keen on the move, as it is the Copa America next year, and he wants to join a team that will guarantee him minutes.
You're trying to add weight to the word desperate, and I don't think you need to, because I think it's just the way the word is used in England. I mean, it's one of those loaded words like spoiled here, where it's not. I mean, Carlo Ancelotti has managed him before. He likes him. He tried to sign him at the beginning of this year for Napoli. So he wants to bring him in because he likes him as a player. He's not desperate in that, oh my gosh, I can't sleep if this doesn't happen. He's desperate to do it because he likes the player. And he's worked well with him. So
what was the word that
loaded word?
What was the other word? Was it earlier this week or last week that we were trying to let folks know that the definition over in England is not the same connotation. Scheme, thank you. That one. So, desperate and scheme.
They have lots of words in the UK in our shared language that have very different connotations than they do here.
So, I will add that one to my list. Desperate and scheme.
Yeah, I don't think desperate was in any way negative in this.
So, in discussing Inter Miami and David Beckham has apparently approached Atletico Madrid star Diego Costa to sound him out over a move.
Wow.
Once again, that is from our friends at the Daily Mail, and it comes from Jordan Seward. David Beckham reportedly attempted to persuade Diego Costa to sign for...
Keep going.
To enter Miami before the pandemic struck. Beckham is targeting a host of household names to bring Inter Miami. He has already sounded out Luka Modric and James. According to Marca, the former Manchester United star also made an approach for Diego Costa. So we can add Diego Costa to the list. The 31-year-old, who has only scored 2 times this season, was thought to be one of Beckham's priority targets this summer. Costa recognizes that this would be his last opportunity to secure a big money contract, but the potential move has been put on hold with the coronavirus crisis bringing the transfer market to a standstill and plunging clubs into financial uncertainty.
You think we've seen some villains in MLS before? You get Diego Costa into this league, and it'll be epic. It will be epic. He will terrorize some center backs, and he will start some fights. And I'm down for it. I'm all in. It's not the approach that I expected Inter Miami to take, but I'm here for this. This could be lots of fun. He will be hated. He will be hated by many, but he will be a player that will help them win games if he's able to stay healthy, and he hasn't really done a whole lot lately. We'll see where he's at physically, but in terms of the dark arts, he knows them very well. He is a very, very clear practitioner of them.
Costa is under contract until 2021, thought to be earning in the region of £150,000 a week, would save Atletico a significant amount on wages if he was to be offloaded. He would have had an opportunity to see the growth of MLS last summer when Atletico took part in a preseason U.S. tour. I am all for Diego Costa if he ends up in MLS with Inter Miami. I would second that motion to the floor.
Yeah, it'll be out of hand. It'll be completely out of hand.
I guess this is the point in the show where I should thank our sponsors, yes?
Yes, it is.
So, let's discuss our friend Steve Apolinski and Associates at aa-legal.com. You can request a free consultation by checking in with the live chat on the website. Live chat's up 24/7. You can also give them a buzz at 404-377-9191. Shoot him an email at Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at aa-legal.com. Knowledgeable, compassionate, successful trial attorneys. Over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in verdicts and settlements serving clients in Georgia and Alabama. So, once again, you can hit them up a bunch of different ways. Recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia. Stephen Apolinski has been recognized as one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia. So once again, aa-legal.com. Go to the live chat, available 24/7. 404-377-9191, or fire it off in the email form. It's Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at aa-legal.com. How about that?
Nicely done.
And then also our friend Jason Wright and the Jason Wright Agency, like friend and be a part of the conversation with our friends at Country Financial. Jason Wright Agency on the Facebook. Jason Wright with a W, AGEN on Twitter. The commissioner of the Fantasy League has also been a proud supporter of everything SDH and Soccer Down Here Networks since day one. So if you've got questions in the insurance aisle, go to the Jason Wright Agency and our friends at Country Financial. Jason Wright with a W-A-G-E-N on Twitter. Jason Wright Agency on the Facebook.
All right, what do we have on the Twitters right now?
Nathan Pugh says, Poch to Newcastle gaining alleged steam, but it ain't happening until it happens.
Pretty much.
Question from Joe Johnstone this morning.
What's up,
he says, if you were to prioritize all aspects of revenue in MLS, TV, tickets, match day purchases, how would it break down in MLS compared to other leagues around the world? He says he's just trying to get a holistic picture from a revenue-only standpoint.
You have to factor in sponsorships, too. That's another key bucket. So I don't know exactly, but in MLS, the TV bucket is much smaller than in other major leagues. In terms of comparing the overall, let's use a pie analogy because we use pie charts, right? So the slice of TV pie out of the MLS pie is a smaller piece of pie. We're going to call it an apple pie because it's a league in the United States.
Yes.
It's smaller than the slice of mincemeat pie that the Premier League has. I just think they eat mincemeat. I don't know. I might be wrong. It's smaller. The TV pie, piece of pie in England is huge. It's much more than any of the other categories. Sponsorship is... I don't know. I don't know in England if sponsorship is more than tickets or not. In the U.S., I think the biggest slice of the MLS pie is tickets. I think sponsorship is probably next. Game day, other things, and if you want to include merchandise in here that's not bought on a game day, I think you probably should. The way I would do it, in terms of kind of making it coherent, TV money is a slice. Sponsorship is a slice. Match day revenue, which would be tickets, which would be concessions, which would be parking if that comes into play. All of that would be a slice. Merchandise would be a slice. So in the U.S., the slice for match day revenue is a bigger slice than it is in other major leagues. The slice of TV money is smaller than it is in other leagues. Sponsorship is an important thing, but you're talking... Actually, the sponsorship is bigger than I think for top clubs anyway. And this is going to depend club to club. For top clubs who are getting good money on their shirt sponsor, clubs who have a second shirt sponsor on the sleeve, clubs who have other sponsors activated in a big way, they're making more money there than they are on TV. But for clubs that are not making much on sponsorship, they might make more on TV. That's going to vary club to club because the TV money is just evenly split. The match day revenue, obviously, that's going to be an even bigger slice here in Atlanta versus San Jose, for example. So maybe you get in MLS, maybe you get more variety in the different pies team to team. But in general, the TV slice is much smaller here than it is anywhere else. The match day slice is much bigger here than anywhere else. Sponsorship is where you can really make or break yourself depending on how you do and depending on your market. And merchandise, too. I mean, we know that Atlanta United has sold merchandise really, really well and probably created a more significant slice than maybe anybody else in the league. And it's a legitimate slice of pie It's not the crumbs at the bottom of the pan.
Rich Ransom is in this morning, and he has an activity.
I like activities.
Is there an Atlanta United match where the team lost, and we can, and I would just post this for any listener listening live, or just because you're not listening live, you pick this up later, don't be afraid to hang out and not be a part of said activity. Is there an Atlanta United match where the team lost, but you still went, that was a good game? Example, the 2019 Philadelphia Union win over Atlanta, which clinched them the playoffs. In a bar after the match, Atlanta supporters who came for the match told us they enjoyed the game and said that was the best a team played against them that season. Hashtag Well Past Wednesday.
Yeah, that's actually a really good shout, because that was a game that I really remember. First, you had a great goal, a great team goal to go up 1-0. And that was a game where the legs just fell off after a lot of games, a lot of travel, short period of time. That just ran out of gas. Like, it wasn't a game where Atlanta played badly, in my opinion. They just couldn't see it out. They couldn't finish it off. It was a really good match. So that's a really good example. I'm trying to think of others looking back. Best losses in Atlanta United history. That's probably the one for 2019, but let me double check, because I like to be thorough here on the show, and see if there's another one that would potentially qualify. Not the DC loss, not the Columbus loss, not the Dallas home loss, not the Red Bulls loss up there. The RSL game out in Utah wasn't bad. The Toronto game up there was just craziness. Definitely not the Chicago game, not the Seattle game. The LAFC game is actually one that you could put into this conversation. It was a really bad 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Outside of that, Atlanta played pretty well and played LAFC pretty well, so that could qualify. Not the home loss to Columbus, definitely not the loss at Yankee Stadium. I mean, because of the stakes, you're not going to feel that way, but the performance in the playoff loss to Toronto was really good. It was not a bad performance. You gave up 2 amazing goals. It wasn't a performance that wasn't good enough to get you to the final. So you're not going to feel that way about it because it ended the season, but in terms of the Atlanta performance on it, it was a strong performance in a loss. 2018, we'll leave the playoff loss at Red Bull Arena out because it's kind of hard to separate that from the series. Definitely not the Toronto loss on decision day. Definitely not the loss at Red Bull Arena. Definitely not the loss in D.C. The game in Dallas on July 4th, it fell apart at the end. It fell apart so badly at the end, you're not going to have a warm feeling coming out of it. The losses at home to Kansas City and Red Bulls, because they had controversy in them, you're not going to feel great about it. The Kansas City one, you'll feel better about because of how good the team played with 10 men for a long stretch of it. There's nothing good to feel about the Houston loss to Open 2018, so throw that one out the door. 2017 was a very different feel in general because it was the first year. The first game is one where, you recognize that the team played well. I don't think we really knew how to feel about games at that point yet because we didn't have a basis for comparison. But looking back, they played well in that game. The loss in Montreal was frustrating because of the bad red card to LGP that was later rescinded. The losses to DC in 2017 just drove you crazy. The loss at Yankee Stadium wasn't good. The loss in Vancouver wasn't good. The loss in Chicago in 2017 was awful. The loss to Minnesota is another one where, because of how you lost, you're not going to feel good about it at the end. But in terms of having a red card, coming back from 1-0 down to go up 2-1 with 10 men, you feel really good about. And then it all fell apart at the end and you lost. So that erases the good feeling. the Philadelphia game in 19, maybe the Dallas game in 18, but again, the way you lost is going to hurt you there. It might be that Philadelphia game. That might be the one.
Tafka has a teaser question this morning.
Okay. So now we have activities and teasers, all right?
Yes. I'm guessing that there may be another paper/opus coming from Tafka with said teaser question here.
Oh, boy.
If there is a way to implement a promotion relegation system that allows USL clubs a route into MLS, rewards them for financially doing so, protects MLS clubs from relegation, and adds a new and exciting storyline soccer product to provide to television broadcasters, is it worth it if it isn't pure pro-rel? Is a less than perfect pro-rel a desirable endeavor if pure pro-rel is impossible?
I don't know how you do it. Because I don't like the theory that some have floated out that you would have like your 30 teams in MLS and then you'd have 2 teams from USL Championship that get promoted for a year and then they get dropped back down the next year and 2 new teams come up. Like that's goofy. I don't like that. I don't think there's a way to make a faux pro-rel and have it actually make sense.
Pro-rel?
Something like that. Because you gotta have, if you're doing it, why are you doing it? Are you doing it just to do it? Then don't do it. Are you doing it for financial reasons? What are they? I'm sorry, what are they? If Reno and
New Mexico?
No, because they're in the same side. If Reno and New Mexico would actually be that would not fit into this conversation. Reno and Charlotte. Well, no, Charlotte's probably going to be different because of Charlotte coming in MLS, so they'll leave them out. Reno and it's not going to be a second team. Reno and Memphis. If Reno and Memphis are your 2 teams that get promoted into MLS, is that going to change anything from a TV perspective? Is that going to change anything from a financial perspective? Is it going to better MLS? I don't think it does. If you're doing pro-rel just to do it to fulfill what some people have said you should do, that's not a good enough reason. If there is a compelling business reason to do it, do it. Otherwise, what I think you end up doing in this is you cheapen the competition, but what you can do is put more emphasis on the Open Cup. And this is why I think Mexico went from doing their cup as a normal knockout competition to a group stage, because it was their in-between way to expose second division teams to top flight teams in meaningful games. That was how they wanted to do it. Could you create something like that here? Well, not if you're going to do the Super League idea we talked about, because that's going to take up the time on the calendar. You're just going to do the Open Cup. But you have to put the emphasis on the Open Cup, because then that's a property that could change the financial side of it. I just don't think doing pro-rel for the sake of saying you're doing it accomplishes anything. So you can only do it if you're actually going to really do it. And right now in MLS, I just don't think there is a compelling reason to make it work, because the second division as a whole is not strong enough. It's not strong enough on its own. It's not close enough in terms of revenues and budgets and level. It's just not. If the top independent team in the USL Championship moved into MLS for the season, it would be really bad. It'd be really bad. And we always hear a couple different things when this stuff comes up. Well, the money they would get by moving up would make it okay. That happens if you have a TV contract that is huge, like the Premier League. You don't have that right now. What would they get? They would get a share of $90 million right now. They'd get $3 million.
$3? Yeah.
They'd get $3 million. Does that dramatically change their fortunes? Not really. It might let them go get a couple players. Like, that's all it's going to do. It's not the Premier League. The Premier League has that because they have a TV contract, not because they have pro rel. And the second thing is, well, then a bunch of sponsors would jump on board. There's not a sponsorship tree that blooms when a team gets promoted. In England, promotion is something that teams spend themselves into oblivion chasing because there is a giant pot of money at the end of the rainbow. That's not necessarily the case in other leagues, and the reason it's there is because of TV money in the Premier League. That's it. It's not because of pro rel. That's the part that we have to understand here. Just doing it doesn't necessarily change the bottom line. It could hurt the bottom line. Why do you think Mexico is not doing it with promoting teams that are not going to raise the level of the first division? They're actually going to pull it down. That's something you have to consider. So I think your first step is two things. The second division needs to continue to grow, and it's absolutely on the right path. The USL Championship is the best second division the United States has ever had. They're going to have to weather the storm of all of this, and we'll see what it looks like for them coming out the other side. But they need to continue to grow. 2, the Federation needs to make the Open Cup a bigger deal. They need to put more money behind it from a marketing perspective, but they also need to put more prize money behind it so it is seen as a more serious competition. Get a title sponsor on that and put that money up to the teams that win it and teams that advance along the way. Do what the Copa Argentina did. At the end of the game, present a giant cardboard check. And that's, these guys are playing for money. The basketball tournament, literally called the basketball tournament. That's the whole point of it. You know, it's kind of like an Open Cup for basketball outside of the professional leagues. Like, you start a team, you go play in this thing. You got a lot of former pros, you got a lot of former college players in it. They go play. They're playing for cash. Straight up. Don't hide that. Make the Open Cup that. If Christos goes in and beats Chattanooga FC in the first round, get Christos on the field, get a photographer out there, and take a picture with their giant check of $5,000 or $10,000 or 15 or 20 or whatever it ends up being. And do the same thing all the way up the ladder in the Open Cup. Do those things, and then you can have the conversation about, is the second division strong enough to really do promotion relegation? Because from a competitive perspective, it's good. From a financial perspective, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't make it better.
John Nason's in this morning, and he's looking at his Coventry City, and he says that Coventry City fans are looking for a new owner for championship football next season. 2 hands at praying emojis to follow on a Wall Pass Wednesday. Yes, John, I know not to mention the word Sisu in your presence until they're out the door.
Why don't you give the context again of why this tweet happened?
Well, I mean, if it's Coventry City, they have been saddled with this. No.
When we were talking about the other potential Newcastle owner that is reportedly offering more money, but probably won't get that club, and other clubs they should look at.
Okay, well, I'm glad that... I just thought that this was another John Nason anti-Sisu tweet. That's what I thought.
No, he doesn't just fire those off for no reason. I need some kind of like context sounder to drop off, because you never provide it. And it's so funny. I need like context, pal. Something, I don't know. I need to find
context. You need I'm trying to think of something, if there was ever any kind of a context discussion that would give that kind of a drop. I'll have to put that.
If anybody can give me a context drop so I can hit it on these moments, please send it my way.
Okay.
But anyway, the owner that is a reported owner that wants to spend £350 million on Newcastle.
Yes.
Our American friend who thinks that Newcastle could be the next Liverpool. Could Coventry be anything like that? Um, I do not know their stadium situation at this point. I know they sold it, right?
Yeah, yeah. They play like 30 or 40 miles away, and it's a pain.
All right, so if you're gonna do it, man, this is your pitch. This is your pitch to Mr. Moneybags. Of what was his business? Clear TV.
Yeah, Clear TV. Henry
Okay.
Morris.
What is Clear TV these days? By the way.
Oh, I think it's just an aggregator, but let me just so I can get it figured out myself.
I don't even know what it is at this point.
I thought that they were the TV antenna that captures free digital and HD signals. Watch 4K TV free.
Okay, so Henry Morris is going to have to cash out pretty quick because I don't know if that has a long-term future. So, all right, Henry Morris got a boatload of money burning in his pocket. He doesn't get Newcastle because it gets sold. He can't get Leeds because they've made the decision. All right, we've invested this money. We've taken these losses. This is the payout. We're going to stay in the Premier League. We're good. We don't need anybody else. So he loses out on both of those. It's down to the next level. Coventry's the one that comes to the table. This is the pitch. You're going to spend less to buy it. Yep, absolutely. They're coming into the championship now. You have more time to build. Your money can have a bigger impact in the championship straight away. So you don't have to. You buy the team for less. You don't have to put up stupid money to win the championship straight away and build into a Premier League team and then get that payoff. So you're going to spend less to get the Premier League payoff. That's compelling, but you're going to be probably absorbing debts, and I don't know how much they are. And at Coventry, I know at least at different points they were significant.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to buy your stadium back.
Yes, get back to Rico.
There's no point in buying a team like this if you don't control the venue. So you're going to have to buy the venue too. That's the great unknown with it. If you can pull those things off, can you do it for less than you would spend at Newcastle? Absolutely. Can you do it for less than you would at Leeds? Probably. Because you're probably buying the team for less. But you have to buy the stadium, and that's the tricky part. The Rico, how big is that venue?
Oh,
I mean, it's a good size, right?
yeah. I mean, it's. I mean,
It's
they
a
have
Premier League venue.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say it's in the high 20s, low 30s.
Yeah, so that's absolutely a Premier League venue. So that's one of the things you're looking for here. You can't go buy Rushden and Diamonds and expect to turn them into a Premier League team because you don't have a venue.
32-6.
Yeah, that's good. You are going to hit some limitations at the top end, but if you're buying Coventry, you're not expecting Coventry to turn into Liverpool. I don't think. If you are, you might be a little delusional. Sorry, John. Nathan. Can Coventry be a clear, mid-table, consistent team in the Premier League? Sure. I mean, if you get Sheffield United in that conversation, if you get some other clubs that have been in that conversation over the years that have been able to hold their own for a while, you could do that with the right ownership at Coventry. You have infrastructure to make that happen. But the stadium part is the hardest element to predict because you've got to buy the stadium. That's got to be part of the deal. Who owns the stadium at this point?
Oh, let's see.
Is it the rugby team?
Yeah, I think it is the rugby team because of all of the shenanigans when Sisu wanted to leave Rico in the first place, and they just went ahead and sold it over.
Okay. Well, maybe you just buy the rugby team as part of the whole deal, too. If you've got that kind of money to float around, you can probably pull that off. So,
yeah, Wasps Holding Limited owns the stadium.
All right. Well, maybe buy Wasps or give Wasps a good chunk of change to buy the stadium back and give them a lease to play there. Whatever you got to do to make that happen. But you've got to control your venue or Coventry makes no sense. That's the number one element to it. So it's not crazy. Like, out of teams that are at that level, Coventry's one that can definitely be bigger than they are. They have been. So, if somebody can make the compelling pitch, hint, hint, John Nason, put together the proposal sheet, send it to Clear TV.
Yes. And in the discussion of Liverpool versus Newcastle, where we were discussing where Henry Morris, the source that talked to the paper and how Henry Morris was enamored with what Liverpool did, Nathan Pugh elaborates. He says that Fenway Sports Group increased the size of Anfield instead of building a new one, solidified the infrastructure of the club to make it sustainable, and instituted a ticket price freeze instead of insanely increasing season over season.
And they're able to do that because of their financial heft. That's the key element to it, and that's where I push back on some of Klopp's statements, like, oh, well, poor little us and Manchester City spending all this. Guys.
Poor little us.
Like, come on. I don't think he actually said poor little us. He gives that impression sometimes. It's easy to play the underdog, and that's what you're trying to do. I get it. I understand it, but it's a little obnoxious because Liverpool has tons of money to work with. If they're able to institute a pricing freeze on tickets, they're able to do that because they have the money to handle that. I would probably assume that expanding Anfield was cheaper than building a new stadium. And it was the right move because, unless Anfield is just not working in its format, and it's not, it's fine. It works well. There's no need to build another one unless you just want to do it and want to build a giant stadium because you can. They've got money to work with, but they've also got a history and a heritage and a community around them that they're able to tap into. And as long as they sustain that and feed that, they're going to be just fine. Newcastle has a lot of that, but not as big of that. And they've got bad recent history. More bad recent history than Liverpool did when FSG came in. Liverpool was not... Liverpool didn't get relegated multiple times in the last 15 years.
No.
So they didn't have to deal with that part of it. But I've said it for years, and I still really believe it. Newcastle is the club that's outside of the top clubs that can be a top club based on what they're working with. And it's a club that would absolutely make sense for somebody who wants to come in and buy, spend less, build them up, and turn them into that, as opposed to dropping stupid, crazy money to buy Liverpool or to buy Manchester City or to buy Manchester United or Chelsea or Arsenal. Most people aren't going to have that money to work with on an individual basis. You're going to have to form a consortium. To buy Newcastle? Well, you might be able to do that on your own, maybe with some small partners mixed in. And you could turn Newcastle into your mega club. Yep.
Toward the end of the show, we have an SPFL update, by the way.
Oh, jeez.
Shiva is having the chance to listen live after a long time. Morning,
What's
Shiva.
Up, Shiva?
Thanks for hanging out with us. My thoughts. Test players, isolate them for 6 months, and play out the season. I don't see any other way of doing this. If someone tests negative today, it doesn't mean that they are negative tomorrow.
Absolutely. The testing, and I feel like I have to keep saying this because people are getting really bent out of shape if you say, like, yeah, I'd like to see the league come back. It's like, no, you can't even think that. Well, yeah, you can think that. It has to be safe. A big part of the safety part is testing. And it's not testing one time. It is testing consistently. There has to be enough tests to do that. The leagues have the money to buy the tests, but there have to be tests for the population as a whole as well. You can't just buy up the tests. So that's going to take a little bit of time to get there because right now there's just not enough tests in the U.S. Other countries, different conversation. In the U.S., there's not enough tests out there as a whole. They shouldn't be bought up by the professional leagues to do it. When that changes and they can buy up enough tests to consistently test, then you can have this conversation. Isolating them completely for 6 months is going to be hard. Is it possible? Yeah, I mean, it is. But, is it going to be an easy sell to players? Well, I'll tell you that the trade-off on the player side, and this is an MLS conversation, is probably going to be, that pay cut you guys have talked about. We ain't doing it if you're asking us to isolate for 6 months to play the season.
Yeah.
I know you're going to make less money, but you're going to pay us every dollar if that's what we have to do to play the season, because that's not what we intended to do when we came here to play. That's an understandable negotiation, and we'll see where that goes. The testing's going to be the key. It can't happen until you have consistent testing. And then, yes, you're going to be at that point where, okay, you've isolated, either complete isolation or like what Germany's talked about, where it's a kind of isolation but not completely. You're at home. Like, there's ways to isolate the travel and do private travel. Top teams can spend that money and do it. If they want to make this happen, they can. All that can be worked through, but none of it makes sense if you don't have enough testing to deal with changes. If somebody tests positive, then you have to have a plan. Then is it immediately testing your teammates to make sure that everybody else is good, and maybe it's, and this is the part on the testing, I don't know if, like what happened with the NBA. Now, I didn't hear about anybody else who tested negative initially and later tested positive from that situation with Rudy Gobert.
Right.
Donovan Mitchell, they didn't announce that he tested positive straight away, but he was treated differently on their travel back to Utah, and I think he talked about it when he got back, if I remember right. I might be wrong on that. But I don't think it was a situation where he tested negative and then tested positive later from the contact with Rudy Gobert.
Right.
So if the testing is good and player tests positive on a Wednesday and you've got a game on Saturday, okay, he's going to be isolated. Obviously, he's tested positive. You test the teammates. If they test negative, are you good to go? Is the testing sure enough that you are good to go at that point and they can play? That's another question. I don't know the answer. That's got to have an answer by the time we get to this point. It's all going to hinge on the testing, because it doesn't make sense without it, because you can't guarantee the safety. And none of this makes sense if you can't guarantee the safety. I'd like to think that we are making developments and progress on the testing side of thing every single day. And just because it is what it is on April 29th, it might not be that on May 29th. And we might be in a position to be able to play later under these situations where maybe we're not able to play now. That's okay. That's why I don't think you rule everything out right now based off the right now.
Other than scheme and desperate, were there any other words that...
well, spoiled. I mean, we've had that conversation.
Spoiled. Were there any other words other than those three that we've talked about on the show?
Those are the only three I can think of. I mean, there's plenty more, but those are the only three that I can come up with off the top of my head.
Because Chris Hutchison comes up with a quote from George Bernard Shaw. England and America are two countries separated by the same language.
That's true.
Tafka is in this morning off of the Rich Ransom homework assignment. Sorry, activity.
Yes, it was an activity.
Yes. So Tafka said the first one that comes to mind is Toronto 2017. That was Toronto's epic season. We played them very well, but there was lost on a crazy Gio free kick. He says, oops, it was a draw. Never mind. He says, oops, it was a draw. Never mind.
Yeah, draw.
So then he goes, best loss, game one, our opener to Red Bulls. That's his vote.
Oh, okay, game one, yeah.
Game one.
Yeah, it's hard to... That's so different. I wouldn't say it's a better loss than like the Philadelphia game or some of the others because it's kind of in its own category, but no, I can buy that.
And so for the time that we have left, anybody has anything on their mind, let us know on the Twitters at Soccer Down Here. I promised you...
Anybody play the game called soccer?
Occasionally, Fred, I have. But we're going to talk about Scotland, and maybe they haven't.
Oh, boy.
In Scotland, today?
Yes. The SPFL has questioned the need for an expensive internal investigation into ending the season after Rangers sparked a general meeting.
Wait a minute. The SPFL has questioned the need for it when they are the ones who need to be investigated.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
The 42 clubs are voting on May 12th whether to instigate an external review of the circumstances surrounding the vote to end the lower three divisions and possibly the Premiership season.
Is instigate another one of these words we need to add to the list?
I think so. This is on Sky. This is Sky Sports.
I mean, because here that's a little bit of a loaded word, and it's literally just to get it started. So.
Yeah, instigating. Rangers got backing from Stranraer and Hearts to call the general meeting, but will need 32 of the 42 clubs to vote for an inquiry. In an open letter, SPFL chairman Murdoch...
Wait a minute. So, okay, so this is how this process works. So, to call the EGM, the Extraordinary General Meeting, and there's another word we need to add to the list. To call the EGM, you have to have 3.
Yes.
So they got themselves and the 2 clubs that were going to get relegated to say, hey, we want an EGM. Get their EGM. It's nothing to do with EDM. It's not electronic dance music. It is an extraordinary general meeting. All right. So then, once you have the EGM, you've got to get 32 of 42.
75% looks like.
To
80%
support having an inquiry. You did have an investigation by Deloitte into this, and they said, "Oh no, everything's good.
We're
all
good.
good." Yeah, we know that there was this vote that ended up in this other folder, and we know that you announced the results before you had that vote, and then you allowed that group to change that vote, even though they had submitted it. Everything's fine. Everything's peachy. Everything's copacetic.
Nothing to see here.
Deloitte
All is
said
well.
that's all fine. Okay.
In an open letter, SPFL Chairman Murdoch McLennan wrote, quote, 8 of the 9 members of your board of directors believe the demand for such an open-ended, hugely time-consuming and expensive investigation carried out by a senior QC to be wholly unnecessary, inappropriate, and yes.
Who is his letter to, by the way?
I believe this is to those 3 clubs and to the league in general.
Well, he said
to the
8
SPFL.
of 9 board members. Was it specifically to Rangers?
I think so, yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. So he is now saying that there is 1 board member. Is that right?
8 of the 9 believe the demand is hugely time-consuming. So it looks like
he is
one.
Saying that there is 1 board member of 9 who is bound and determined to push this through.
Yes.
What's his name? Call him out.
That is not in the rather large correspondence put out by Murdoch McLennan.
Oh, yay, there's more. What else did Murdoch have to say?
He says, at this hugely challenging time, distractions, scapegoating, and sideshows are our enemy. We currently...
Okay.
We currently have a very small executive team comprising only 5 senior members of staff who are working tirelessly in the interests of Scottish football. 2 of them are the subject of unexplained calls for their suspension.
Hold on. They weren't working tirelessly when they didn't check the spam filter.
Exactly. Paragraph.
As your independent, non-executive chairman, I'm entirely satisfied with the rigorous process that your board undertook in putting the SPFL director's written resolution to members. It was the product of several weeks of intensive work, and my eyes are starting to hurt, so I'm going to kind of stop reading this. Except I'm going to go to the bottom.
Yeah, you can't just leave it there.
No. Ultimately, however, it is for you, the member clubs of the SPFL, to decide whether you wish the time of our staff and board members and your money to be spent on the exercise now sought by Hearts, Rangers, and Stranraer, without Rangers having made available to the company or to SPFL clubs any of the evidence which they claim is in their possession. I therefore...
Okay, first off, there's one thing before he gets all riled up at the conclusion. To stick your head in the proverbial sand and say there's nothing to see here, when you had a vote and the vote from a team ended up in a spam filter, and you thought, well, they just didn't vote, so we're just going to go ahead and announce it, but not say it's final. Just say, yeah, this is the voting as of this time. And there's one club that hasn't voted. And they actually did vote, and you could actually see that vote if you checked your spam filter. But then when you announce that, yeah, this is the voting as of this time, and there's still one club that hasn't voted, and it's not final yet, then that club says, oh, wait a minute, they didn't count our vote. We can change our vote, and it can mean all of this. Okay, yeah, we're going to change our vote. To stick your head in the proverbial sand and say, nothing to see here, everything's fine, stop fooling yourself. People screwed up. There is no way around it. People screwed up. Should they be fired for it? Different conversation. I don't know what these people have done in their jobs. I don't know if they should be fired for this. I don't know if this is a recurring thing. I have no idea. But you cannot say that there is nothing to see here. This is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard of in a voting process, to not just miss the vote. That's bad enough. But to miss the vote, go ahead and announce the results, not say that they are final. Just say, yeah, here's the votes, and we're still missing one, and we're waiting on a vote. And not say who it was, but you can start to figure it out, and things can start to see this and then say, okay, well, wait a minute. And then not just do that and then come back and say, okay, we found the vote, here it is. But to come back and say, oh, well, now we're going to allow them to deliberate on their vote for up to 28 days, because that's what your bylaws are. You screwed the whole process up to an extent that it looks really, really sketchy. Really, really, really sketchy.
I think there's something Weasley going on.
Mm-hmm.
There is something Weasley going on, Dave. Because are you that incompetent to screw up the vote this badly, and then the announcing of the results of the vote this badly, and allow somebody to change their vote to get to where you wanted to get? There's something Weasley going on. Can you actually prove it in an investigation? Maybe not. You might not be able to. But for the league, the whole point about an expensive investigation, all that's a valid concern right now. Kudos to actually pulling out a good point. But to just be this arrogant to act like, yeah, everything we did was perfectly fine. That's how these things go. That's how it works. No, you're making a mockery of yourselves, of the league, of all of it. And to continue with that is the worst approach possible. That's why you're at this point. If they just came out and said, look, we really botched that one, guys. We really screwed it up. This is the process to allow us to do what we did. This is where we messed up. we're not going to have it happen again, et cetera, whatever the links we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. We'll check our spam filters, all this kind of stuff. Like, okay, you do all that. You still have a very important question, because the people who voted against the proposal that would have carried the vote if your actual vote that came in first was upheld have a valid concern as to why you allowed a vote to be changed and why you announced the votes the way you did, seemingly inviting this to happen. These things are all real. So when you just stick your head in the sand and act like, no, these people are completely out of their minds for wanting an inquiry into this, you look like a fool. You look like an absolute fool. So I'm right there with this. Like, you have to question it because it looks shady. Is it incompetent or is it shady? That's the question. Because it sure ain't normal.
No. And Rangers still claim to have evidence, and they still claim that they're going to bring it.
Well, okay, now, we keep getting hung up on the evidence. I could care less. The evidence is public. At least in terms of this having the appearance of being shady. Like, we can keep pointing out, like, they claim to have evidence, and we need to see their evidence. Well, yeah, I'd like to see it, because if they can prove that it definitely was shady and not incompetent, then let's see it. But that doesn't, just because they haven't given their evidence, doesn't mean that this doesn't look shady. It absolutely, 100% looks shady.
No doubt. Unless, of course, you're Deloitte.
Yeah, which is mind-blowing, and I'm questioning Deloitte. Because if Deloitte can look at it and say, yeah, everything looks fine to us, tell us how that is. Like, is there a procedure where teams are allowed to change their vote? Is there a procedure where the league just decides to, announce the voting results without all of the votes coming in and open the door up for somebody to potentially change their vote? Is there a procedure to check the spam folders? I mean, like, tell me how this is completely fine, because there's no way it looks fine. And when it looks shady, a lot of times, it might be shady.
Remember, Rangers wants a couple of things investigated, including the information given to clubs ahead of the vote, the decision to announce the result before our votes were cast.
Yeah, that has to be.
The decision to allow Dundee to withdraw their vote, and the interaction with SPFL executives and clubs during the process.
Yeah, exactly. Those are all valid questions. It's like, I'm not trying to just be pro Rangers here, but those are very, very valid questions. Guys, let me ask you a question. How do you allow a club to change their vote? Well, blah, 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 blah. No, just answer the question. How do you allow a club that voted to change their vote? Okay. What did you have to say to the club that decided to change their vote? Were you in communication with them? Were other clubs in communication with them? Because they voted one way, and then their vote was tallied a different way after a period of time where it was public knowledge that their vote was the one that would change everything. You really want me to believe that they just had a change of opinion because of the spam filter, and then they just needed the time to deliberate amongst themselves about maybe changing their vote, and then they decided to do it? Okay, you want me to believe all that? Okay. Yeah.
Right on.
Right.
Yeah, I'll get right on that. So, yes, I figured I would put that one out there this morning to finish up the show.
Let me let me check the Twitters real quick and see if we have any gems on thoughts on Scotland at this point.
Okay.
SPFL letter immediately came up. Let's see.
And you're already laughing.
Yeah, people are saying, wow, this open letter from the corrupt SPFL is something else. Obviously, there's a little bit of bias here on these. Alex Barr, his name is on the letter. He is a founding director at Big Partnership, which is the public relations firm that was responsible for the letter. They are apparently specialists in crisis communications.
Sure.
They've also had a contract with Celtic for 9 years before working with the SPFL. Again, appearances not so good there.
That is some weird, wild stuff. That is funny. I did not know that would be so funny.
Yes.
I did not know that either, Johnny.
Yes. Yes.
Oh man. I'm just gonna read this one from Stuart Weir, who does work with TalkSport. He says, looking at the SPFL letter, what leaps off the page when you see the signatures is the level of integrity. Not a single signatory has a vested interest. Well, apart from him, and him, and him, and absolutely him, and definitely him. And he had his fingers crossed. So, okay, let's continue. Those that signed the SPFL letter, defending the SPFL. Somebody from Motherwell, who would be going into European qualification. Somebody from Hamilton Academical, not getting relegated. Somebody from Aloha Athletic, not getting relegated. Somebody from Brechin City, not getting relegated.
No vested interests at all in that.
Heart and Hand, which is a Rangers podcast, which is probably a little biased, says, the SPFL deny the need for an investigation into bullying clubs into doing what they are told by sending them a letter bullying them into doing what they are told.
Yeah, exactly. Well done.
Oh, man, this is just the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes. Yes.
This is amazing.
We need Jarrett Smith to comment on all this stuff at some point.
Well, he might be biased because he is very anti-Rangers. So, this is just a mess. I mean, the fact that you hired the crisis communications company that had previously worked for Celtic for 9 years, and you think that's going to play well.
Yeah, that'll hunt.
I mean, really?
Sure.
Really, guys?
We're Seth and Amy now. That's a drop you need. Seth and Amy.
I might need to get that one. All right, we're going to finish with David Tanner, who is a freelance broadcaster and event host at TalkSport. He said, one of the SPFL's weak spots is a reluctance to allow journalists to speak to the decision makers. The optics are poor. The PM and FM manage it daily. The optics are better. Today's 9-pager, and this was 3 hours ago, is bizarre in that the SPFL ask their own questions, which the chair answers, sort of. And he continues. Journalists get blamed for the Dundee Magic Vote scandal for having the cheek to call at 5 p.m. for the result of the club ballot. Imagine the furor if we'd refused to give any update. We were simply being open and transparent. Question from David Tanner, why not get Dundee's vote and then announce it? My favorite question is, looking back, what would you have done differently? Answer from the SPFL. In relation to the Dundee FC return, there was little, if anything, we could have done differently. What?
Okay.
There's a lot of things you could have done differently. Tanner finishes with, personally, I was pleased that yesterday's open letter from most of, in parentheses, the board asked for reconciliation and contrition from all parties. Startling, therefore, that the SPFL chairman is bullish and on the offensive today, attacking clubs with an agenda. Make up your mind, please. Yes, we want reconciliation and contrition, but we want it our way.
Mm-hmm. We want our reconciliation.
Man. Let me see what else is going on.
You went down. You went down the SPFL rabbit hole, and this is what happens. It turns into a SPFL black hole.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Lots of people talking about the people who have signed on to the letter and also people who are, crafting it. There's all kinds of conversation about that, which is, it's valid. It's valid. I guess this crisis management consultant also has links to Deloitte. So,
hey, what a surprise!
Look, yeah. Not helping.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Everybody's shaking hands with everybody in the same circle.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not helping. It's really bad. The good things that are coming out of Scotland is what we'll finish on, because we need to finish on something positive. We've talked about Aberdeen and the work they've done to stay strong during all of this. The Arthur Blank Foundation donated money yesterday to continue community programming that is a very important part of Aberdeen and a very important part of the relationship between Atlanta United and Aberdeen. Good news out of Hibs. They have hit a season ticket milestone as numbers track ahead of last year, despite all the uncertainty about when things will get back on action. This is going to happen in some countries and with some clubs because fans recognize that, yep, the financials are a problem. Yep, our club is in peril right now, and they're going to pony up to support their club. That's going to become a bigger part of the conversation the deeper we get into this, and it's very cool to hear the season ticket successes with Aberdeen, now with Hibs. In light of all of this nonsense, in light of all of the uncertainty about when games will be played again, you still got the supporters, in this case, literally putting their money where their mouth is and making sure that the club has some operating capital to work from right now. That's really impressive, and it just speaks to the dedication of supporters in Scotland, and it's happening in other countries too. It's happening. Mm-hmm. I saw a headline, and I don't have the details in front of me, that a number of Detroit City fans whose season, spring season anyway, has been canceled. They're not asking for refunds. They're saying keep it. Now, I don't know if that'll just go to the next season tickets or whatever, but that's the type of conversation you're going to get at the lower division levels at smaller clubs. A little bit harder to generate that kind of feeling at bigger clubs, but you're going to see it too. And the deeper this goes and the amount of the effect here that we get from this stoppage, you're going to see these conversations come up too on the good side. So while the SPFL might be trying to light itself on fire today.
Trying?
No, they're trying. They've already been on fire. They're trying.
I was going to say, they've done a good job of being on fire in the bad way recently.
No, they're trying to do it again because they just haven't had enough.
Self-immolation.
The Depeche Mode song, Just Can't Get Enough, as they do this. And in light of all that, at least you're getting some good news out of Scotland too. So that's where we're going to finish. We will have stoppage time later today, 2 o'clock on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page. Myself, Mike Conti, we will talk soccer in Atlanta, soccer in the United States, probably soccer in other parts of the world, probably other sports too in Atlanta, because that's what the show's turned into these days. So 2 o'clock, facebook.com/929 The Game. We'll have that for you. We'll be back tomorrow. We will have our watch-along of U.S. and Trinidad Tobago 1989. That's going to be on Thursday evening, probably a 7 o'clock start. So mark that down for USA and Trinidad and Tobago, going back into the history of the U.S. national team, 1989, the game that got them into the 90 World Cup for the first time, going to a World Cup in 40 years. So it's going to be fun to watch a very old game, but also talk about the history around it, how much that game meant, because I don't know if we're where we are today in soccer in this country if that result doesn't happen. Talk about why that is on Thursday. So thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the activities. Thanks for the ponderings. And we'll be back tomorrow. Mucho platio.
Mucho platio.